Today we have three very special guests from dotted around the globe. We have Luis Seabra from Lisbon, Portugal. We have Steve Carter, who's just outside Portland, Oregon, and we've got and Todd Williams. I've got that totally wrong. Steve is from Charlotte, North Carolina, and Todd is from just outside Portland, Oregon. Apologies, gentlemen.
That's right.
Bernardo, are you going to introduce the topic for today?
Yes, welcome everyone. I was just waiting to make sure that there wasn't any additional locations. Welcome everyone. The topic for today is how do you know when your project is in trouble?
Okay, so the first question is going to Luis. Luis, how do you know when a project is in trouble? What have been your aha moments in coming to recognize that things aren't going well? And maybe you'd like to start by analyzing the intro to the show.
I'd like to start with the topic itself because it's a very good choice for a topic. It covers people just entering project management to project management experts. A trouble project is something that you have when you have real trouble in a project, not when a task is late or when you have someone on your team that's making trouble. That's not a trouble project. A trouble project is something that goes terribly wrong, and you want somehow to check what can you do with it. So picking up on this, a project basically involves three things: a business need, people, and something you have to do. So troubles can come from each of these parts, and if it comes from what you're doing, that's what usually project managers, most project managers focus on. You can check the regular stuff like cost, schedule, quality, and scope, and to see if something is terribly wrong with that. If you're halfway on your project and your budget for the entire project is already spent, I'd say you have a troubled project. Okay? So this is one side. The other side can come from people. And if you have a team member that's not playing game, that doesn't make your project in trouble. You just have to solve that particular issue. But you have an absent sponsor or a sponsor that leaves the project midway, maybe then you can have a troubled project. Now the third part is about the business needs. Projects are done to address the business needs. Now, particularly in lengthy projects, business needs change, and sometimes people aren't aware of that. So it's pretty sad when you have a really good project with people working tremendously well and happy on it, and they build something that it's no use for no one. That's really sad, and that's a troubled project also. The things that we do in a project should be somehow useful for someone. Now, this is, in general, what can happen, but if you check the literature, and I did some homework for this, there's some things that pop up that for someone with enough experience are red lights. Sarokin has a very good book on this topic, and one of the top motives for project failure and troubled projects, he picks it up on the project description. If it mentions technology on the first paragraph, you're in trouble. So it can really come from anywhere. Just be aware. Project managers tend to focus a lot on what they're doing. For this, you should be aware and lose a bit of your focus and talk to people. Talk to the sponsor, talk to the other business units, talk to the accounting department, human resources, see what's going on around you. Don't close yourself in the project. That's the best advice I can give you regarding the business needs. This question alone we could go on for hours on this, because problems can come from anywhere. So I think I'll ask for Steve's input and Todd's input on this if they want to add something, because otherwise they won't talk and I'll keep running on the topic. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you, Luis. Over to you, Steve, if you want to chip in.
Absolutely, and Luis, thanks for getting us started. And you're right, it's pretty complex. Here's my thought, and you go back to the concept of aha moment. I think I had an aha moment, and I wrote about it in a recent blog article, but trying to figure out when you're at the end of a project that has been in trouble, when did it exactly stumble? Where was the point where it got off the rails? And trying to go back so that you could undo that. And the reality is you can't find that one place in most projects. Most projects that get in trouble and stumble and get off track, it's the result of multiple things that have happened on a daily basis, not the one thing that took you off track. So for me, it's as a PM, it's doing a few things. One, it's knowing your non-negotiables as you start a project, because when things get kind of harried and start getting in trouble, you will be challenged to hold on to what is near and dear and are non-negotiable about how you manage the project and the tools and the techniques you use. If you haven't figured those out in advance, it's very easy to abandon some of those when you're in trouble. So I'd say know your non-negotiables in advance. Take the lessons learned from prior projects. We always talk about this. You get to an end of a project, you spend a lot of time gathering and collecting, and then too often that goes on the shelf. To avoid, falling in a ditch on a project, start off with those. Make sure you've put in place those pieces that need to be there. A couple other quick things. Why not do the lessons learned as you go? So if the project is likely to get off track little pieces at a time, then let's do some incremental lessons learned and build those into our project. Start to change as we go rather than waiting until the end. I think the big thing for me is, as a PM, it's leverage others. You can't be everywhere all the time in every meeting. And the more that you equip others to be thinking like this, to be looking for how are we adhering to our project management plan, how are we following the rules that we said we would, they can kind of be your eyes and ears, and a lot of people help keep the project on track. So those are some of the things that came to my mind about how can you avoid it once something starts to go wrong.
Thanks, Steve. Todd, I was wondering if you had any insight into the sorts of things that you see and pick up. Maybe do you have a sixth sense for detecting when projects are starting to slip into trouble? Over to Todd.
There may be a delay.
Can you hear us, Todd?
Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yes, we hear you now.
Now we can.
Okay, yeah, so I had a mute on my screen, and I apologize. Okay, so one thing that I would say that the first thing you have to look at is whether the projects bring value. And I really don't look at scope, schedule, and budget because I don't think they're an indicator of whether the project's doing right or wrong. I can have an initial scope, an initial schedule, an initial budget that are unrealistic, and myself as a project manager, or when I come into audit, which is what I'm usually doing, is auditing a project, I take a look at whether there really is value. And so that's really in the eye of the beholder. So I go out to the customer and ask them what they're getting. Because I could be 50% over budget, I could be way behind, and if I'm really delivering value, or if I took and pulled that stuff out, so all of a sudden I didn't have the scope that was in there that I was delivering to schedule, I could be delivering something the customer doesn't want to do. I have to underscore what Luis said, and that was that it's people. So my view of a project is to look at people, process, and then technology. And if I see people taking the priorities and putting them in another order and putting knowledge first, that's a huge sign of a problem. So I generally go away from that. That's how I kind of look at it. But to me, I don't really look at scope, schedule, budget. I look at just value, and I feel it's the project manager's responsibility. In fact, I think that's their deliverable, is to make sure that value comes out of the project, and that they're continually working with the customer to make sure that they are getting that value from whatever the deliverable is. And if they aren't, they can kill the project, they can change the project, they have to highlight it. They're the champions that say, yes, this is where the value's at. Some people think that that belongs to the sponsor, but I strongly disagree with that.
Excellent. Thanks, Todd. Bernardo, were you going to move us on to the next one?
Sure. So, Steve, having managed many PMOs, what mechanisms have you used, since we're talking about failure, what have you used to help avoid failure, or what have you done to kind of help set yourself up for success?
Sure. Well, obviously, when you talk about PMOs, there are lots of different kinds. So people define PMOs in different ways. There are some where you've got a major program or connection of projects and you have a separate PMO for that. There are some where that's just an organizational function that helps manage the overall portfolio of projects. In any case, I think the PMO, if it's effective, is trying to create an environment where you can be more successful with projects and helping to remove the roadblocks and the obstacles that most projects hit. So for me, it has been about creating and maintaining effective communication channels. I mean, vast majority of projects you look at that get in trouble have abandoned what they knew were good communication practices. So as a PMO, I have always tried to ensure that we had at the leadership or sponsorship level the right kinds of conversations, the right kinds of communication forums, that you're encouraging PMs to do that within the project itself, and tying people together. Right people, right time, right topic kind of thing can go a long way. The other for a PMO for me is to make it easier for teams to share information across the organization, across the sub-team lines. So if you don't have some sort of shared workspace, whether it be SharePoint or anything else, having some way where the teams can connect, share critical information in a timely manner, access the information and the tools and the reports that they need to have. PMO should make sure that those kinds of things are in place. I think one of the biggest things for me is just sheltering teams from unnecessary work. So too often PMOs, and Todd may have an opinion on this, but too often PMOs put in structure and try to put in work that really doesn't add specific value to the project. And I think a good PMO is there to help projects and PMs to shelter them from some of the stuff they don't need to be doing. So it's getting rid of excessive meetings that are there just to review the status report that's been published. It's getting rid of repetitive conversations just because it's different stakeholder groups. It's thinking at the more global level or the program level about how to simplify things so the PM and the team can go do what they need to do. I think that's where a PMO can help be successful in a project environment.
Do you think that's maybe a result of, and we haven't really discussed it, but politics, organizational politics, and how that helps or hurts the PMOs to survive in the organization?
Well, it is, and I think, again, every organization is different, but if the PMO is set up and if the leader of the PMO takes the view that their clients, their internal customers, if you would, are the PMs and the project teams, and not so much that they themselves are some big value-added function. A PMO should be measured by the success of the projects that they are helping to support. If that's the approach that the PMO takes, then I think everybody can be more successful, and you got more people willing to have the PMO engaged in helping with that.
That makes perfect sense. Either Luis or Todd, any comments to this particular question?
Well, you know, we're on my favorite topic of PMOs, and I just, anybody who reads my blog will realize that I think that the phrase "good PMO" is an oxymoron. So far, I have never seen a PMO help in a project failure situation. I've always seen them in the other light, and so I am definitely the anti-PMO person here. I have to say I love Steve's comment. If the PMO thinks that there's some sort of value added, and we'll just stop there, because if they're not value added, they shouldn't be there. You know, PMOs are to patch a problem in an organization, a leadership problem, and that's the real frustrating part to me. So whenever I look at what causes a failure in a project, what I see is the analogy of anything under stress breaks, and it breaks at its weakest point. If you put a big project in an organization, you stress the organization and it breaks at its weakest point. People will go and put band-aids on top of those weak points and say those will fix the problem when they don't. And I see that a PMO is too many times in place to overcome weak leadership, where leadership can't tell you what the priorities are of projects, what type of people need to be on project, how to rank, and how to get the resources allocated properly. So pretty con on the PMO idea. It does point to, okay, we need to have somebody from up above actually start putting in place what the priorities are on a project to get it moving correctly. So that's kind of my view on the PMO and how it helps in this process. That being said, Steve's comments on communication are huge. What are the three problems with a failed project? Communication, communication, communication. We've all heard that before, and so that is really paramount. If you can't get the communication correct, you're in massive trouble. You know, one of the things I maybe should have said earlier was, you know, when you start seeing the evolution of a project, you see people, they're communicative, they're happy, and they're great, working together. As the project starts to get into a little bit more trouble, you start hearing people saying, well, yeah, I'm pretty sure we can do this. I think it can happen. And you get this non-logical aspect of working on a project and getting it done, a little more hope, and that devolves relatively quickly into people start to argue and start to fight about what's going on, and you see this argument, not good constructive criticism and moving forward. And that changes all of a sudden to the point where it's just perfectly silent and no one will say anything. And that's a concern that somebody who says something is going to end up getting blamed for everything that went on. And I draw the analogy to anybody who has a child, a small child, a toddler, in the 1 to 3 year range, right after they learn to crawl. And we all know that they make a lot of noise. And the minute they're silent, we all need to know to find out where that little toddler's at, because we know that they're getting in a massive amount of trouble. And the same thing happens on a project. Is projects go silent, it's time to go looking and figuring out what's going on with them, because there's a problem that they're trying to hide and they're concentrating on it. Everyone wants to keep their head below the divider. That's kind of my view on it. A little bit of stump speech there, but it's all up to you guys.
That makes perfect sense. John, I didn't know if you wanted to ask any additional questions.
Yes. So we've obviously gone into, first of all, what are the signs of a project getting into trouble, and we've talked a bit about, you know, what sort of intervention can we take to try and avoid projects from falling into a trap. But now we'd like to turn the discussion to, okay, as I put in the on the webpage, the brown stuff has hit the fan, and it's time to do something about it. So perhaps we can go around the group and ask about some strategies, get some advice on strategies for turning around failing projects. And I know that Luis is probably keen to get in on this. Would you like to have a go at this one first, Luis?
Sure. Bringing a project back to track is something that it depends on the problem is at. If it is with people, if it is within what you're doing, if it is from the business. But generally speaking, I'd say that bringing a project back to track requires you to have a new project to address that, and requires a separate budget and the will to spend that budget. So not all projects are good to focus this strong. It has to mean enough for the organization to put this extra effort to do it. Now, things can come from anywhere, and it can even come from technical issues, for instance. And there's a story that I'm not sure that if it's true or not, but in the 60s, at the time where the United States and the Soviet Union were on the space race, it is told that the United States spent a huge amount of money developing a pen that could write with no gravity. And the Russians solved the problem taking pencils. So my first big piece of advice on this is use common sense. Don't get lost in the technicalities of stuff on doing the exact thing right. Lose that. Just use common sense. That's the first thing that you have to be really aware, and you have to have it really present. Regarding what Steve was talking about communication, what Todd was talking about PMOs, PMOs can help or can make it difficult for you to bring a project. Communication is always a must. You must ensure communication channels are working, and then you can speak with a sponsor, with your team, with no problems. And this can be very complicated, because if you have an organization with people coming from different departments where you don't have the authority on the people on your team, you have a problem there. If you don't make those on your team want to participate on your project, it's very difficult for you to have them working right. So this could be a very good problem, a very big problem, sorry. The more practical approach is to look at the scope, the time, the cost, and the quality of the project. Usually, when you're trying to bring a project back on track, you have to spend either more money or more time, or lose some quality, or a combination of those. But you have to be willing to do that. So the organization has to be aware that there would be an extra effort to bring the project on track. But basically, I'd say that not losing track of common sense and make a lot of use of it is a real must when you want when you really want to bring a project back on track.
Thanks, Lewis. Can I bounce it across to Todd then? Todd, for your views on what sort of action you want to take to turn a project around?
Sure. I mean, I'm pretty vocal about this also, and of course I wrote a book on it too. So it's all, to me, it's all about people, 100%. I spend the first probably week being assigned to a trouble project to pull it out of the ditch, talking to people. I talk to everybody I possibly can, from the CEO, sponsors, down to the people who are actually coding and twiddling bits or bending nails or whatever it is that the project's doing. It's up to them. They know what's right with the problem project and what's wrong, and they know how to fix it. And it's really somebody's job that comes in to pull that all together, pick up the valuable nuggets, and then move forward and implement those. I have a story I tell quite often that I get the team together and I say to them, you know what's wrong, you know what's going to fix it, and I'm going to put that all together into a report and give it to management, and I'm going to get credit for it. And there's a bit of moan, there's a bit of laughter in the room, but there's a real truism to that, and it's not all about ego or my ego, because people have to have that outside consultant take a look at it and say, yeah, this is what has to happen. I end up being the objective view because I'm from the outside. I don't have any emotion in it. Another phrase I use is I'm passionately dispassionate about the project itself. I just try to get it pulled together. And so I'm able to voice the words of the team in a neutral sense to get people to actually understand how it needs to change, and they'll accept it. In the long run, the team gets the credit, but in that emotional bit of taking a project and putting it back on track, it's all taking the words of the team and putting it into something that management can react to. So very, very foremost, probably for the first few weeks, I am focused 100% on people. Then I'll drop to getting some processes in place. Maybe fairly soon, things like meeting minutes. I'm a pretty anal retentive about that. Getting meeting minutes in place to have effective meetings goes back to Steve's comment on communication. To Luis's comment about this is a new project, a recovered project's a new project. I'm really a stickler on that. Anytime you have a recovered project, consider it dead, start a new one. You have a new budget. There has to be, because you're already over budget. That's why it's red. That's why it's in trouble. So you just got to start all over again, re-baseline it, and think of it as a brand new project. Steve, your comments?
Yeah, very quickly. I mean, great comments. I think, to me, it's all about narrowing the focus. So first of all, Luis already mentioned it. If you can renegotiate, look at the charter. If you renegotiate the scope, the schedule, the resources, whatever you can do there, do it. Reassess the priorities. Eliminate anything that's not absolutely necessary so that we can kind of hone in on the important stuff. For the team, Todd, you talk about working with the individuals that are there. Narrow the focus to very manageable chunks of this major task. The project didn't get off track overnight. It's not going to be fixed overnight. Let's narrow it down to manageable tasks that people can wrap their arms around, and then maintain a laser focus on the objective and do frequent updates. And regardless of how you approach it from a methodology perspective, you can put those pieces in place. I think it helps.
Excellent.
Actually, John, I wanted to just go back to one thing that Todd said, and I'm wondering whether or not this is probably a tribute to project failure or project success, which is the level of experience and ability to lead from a project manager standpoint. We talked about all the surrounding factors of why projects fail. We talked about politics, the environment, the budget, but you know, with the economy not being so great, I've seen a lot of people go into project management and take the PMP just because they want to have credibility. And many companies hire these guys who don't really have that level of experience, and then all of a sudden you see an uptick in project failure. So I just didn't know, for any of the panel, what are your thoughts on that? Could it just be the project managers, the cause of why projects aren't going the way they need to go?
Can I take on that one?
Yeah, go on.
I was just talking to Todd the other day, and we were discussing why this is so complicated, addressing troubled projects, and that's because first you have no recipes for this.
Right.
You cannot have a book that has it all about troubled projects. The other thing is that you need, besides experience, you need some knowledge, deeper knowledge than what comes in the PM book or such. And I was telling Todd, I'm an experienced project manager. I have a blog with great content on project management, and recently I had the biggest haha moment on this, because someone comes to me with a project that's really gone bad, and he says, "Oh, that's easy to solve it. That's you have a long tail. Just divide the projects into two." So this is not rocket science, but you have to be you have to see things as simple as they are, and to address the issues. And for that, you need knowledge and you need experience. So it's very difficult to have one single project manager that knows all about troubled projects. He may have the knowledge, and you do need the knowledge, but you also need the experience. So it's really complex, and again, a great topic for a discussion such as this.
Thank you,
If I
Luis.
can chime in for a second, you know, Bernardo, you said the word leadership, and boy, we need more of that. My comments on the PMO, if you noticed, they were focused on leadership and lack thereof. Having projects as project managers, we don't need managers. We need project leaders.
Agreed.
And you really landed right on top of the big issue, and that is leadership instead of management. People come in, they get their PMP. Don't get me started on that box, and I won't say any more. But we need leaders, and that's new people can start with small projects and do good, but they need to learn the tricks of leadership. I know some people who are very short on their project management experience, but they understand the key points of leadership. They can run a project. Steve?
Yeah, and I know we're short on time, but leadership is the key. So, I mean, everything you've said is absolutely correct. And whether that's the sponsor, the PM, or the individuals on the project team, everybody's got to be an effective leader. I think too often we expect PMs just to be some technician and go apply a certain set of skills or tools, and they'll be successful. If you're not a good leader, then you're not going to succeed in this role any more than you would any other role.
Great. Okay, thank you, everybody. I just want to do a final, I know, as Steve says, we're almost out of time. I want to do a final quick-fire question to each of you, if that's all right. We had a question through the website from Alison Smith, and she was asking, what is the role of the project sponsor in turning around a failing project? So, in one sentence, each of you, what do you think is the main job of the sponsor in turning around a failing project? So should we start with Todd and go across that way? Todd?
Good opinionated statement. They should find another sponsor. They need to get out of the way and get somebody a good sponsor.
Excellent. Okay. And to Steve, what do you think the role of the sponsor is?
So I will go with the track that you're probably stuck with the sponsor. If you're stuck with the sponsor, the sponsor needs to help do those things I talked about before, and that is crystal clear understanding of what the work ahead still is, crystal clear understanding of what the budget and the timeline is, and making sure that they are freeing up the resources to help support that. Great.
And Luis?
I think Dilbert has a few advices on that one, but one of the things you can try to do that it's not easy is to change sponsor if your sponsor isn't fulfilling with his obligations. That's worth trying at least.
Great. And Bernardo, did you want to have a go at that one?
Sure. I mean, in short, I would say your sponsor should be an advocate, your cheerleader, and should be able to help from a political standpoint. If they're not doing that, then they're doing themselves a disservice in being a sponsor for the project that you're leading.
Excellent. Great stuff. Well, we're just about out of time, so Bernardo, did you want to take us through the wrap-up?
Sure. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your time. So thank you for those of you joining us, joining PMTV. Before we go, for each of one of you, Louis, Todd, and Steve, please let us know how our audience members can reach you. So Todd, let's start with you.
So my moniker is Back from Red. You can hit me on that on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, backfromred.com. If you get any one of those, you'll end up finding me. So it's the best way to do it.
This is Steve. You can reach me at stevecarter.nc for North Carolina at gmail.com or steve-carter.com on the website.
The simplest way is to go through my blog. That's ahamoments.net. If you Google it, you'll find the exact address.
Great. Well, thanks ever so much, gentlemen, for your time. It's been really informative. Once again, I'm John Hyde from publicsectorpm.com.
And I'm Bernardo Tirado from the Project Box. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Until next time.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.